Hi, welcome back, and thanks for checking in to watch your next math video lesson. This is lesson 11-1. If you're following along in the textbook, that's actually chapter 11, lesson 1. There's the page numbers there. And the title of this lesson is Angles and Lines. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be looking at the relationships that exist between different kinds of angles that are formed by parallel lines that are cut by a transversal, which is what you're going to see here, two lines that are parallel that are cut by that line, line T, creating all kinds of angles. There's all kinds of relationships happening there. And we're also going to be talking about lines that just intersect each other and the angles that are created because of those intersections of lines. So let me tell you this as we're getting started. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of definitions today. Would highly encourage you to write these definitions down in your notebook, or to take a screenshot and print these notes out if you don't feel like writing all these definitions. So as you can see here, let's go ahead and get started. I have two lines, line M and line N. Those are parallel to each other. And then there is another line, the third line here is line T, which is cutting through those parallel lines kind of at an angle, and that's called a transversal. And what has happened because we have these parallel lines and we have that transversal cutting through them is we now have 8 angles that we have as a result of these parallel lines and the transversal. I numbered the angles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so we're going to be referring back to this design quite often today. The first definition is vertical angles. Vertical angles are opposite angles that have the same measure. So if I'm looking at my design here, angles that are vertical to each other are opposite of each other. That means they are kind of like pointing in opposite directions. I like to think of vertical angles as being back to back with each other. Think about how it would be if you stand back to back with one of your friends, right? So you're looking in one direction and your friend is looking in the complete opposite direction of you. So if I'm looking at our design here and I'm looking for vertical angles, I'm going to say that angle 1 and angle 4 are vertical angles. They're back to back. And they have the same measure. So if I'm going to say that angle 1 is 80 degrees, angle 4 is also 80 degrees. So the vertical angles, or at least those that I've named so far, would be angle 1 and angle 4. Let's look back. Are there any other vertical angles? Oh, absolutely. 2 and 3. 2 and 3 are vertical angles. They're back to back from each other. And if I were to tell you that angle 2 was 100 degrees, guess what? Angle 3 would also be 100 degrees. So, more vertical angles, aside from 1 and 4, would be angles 2 and angle 3. Now, I could do the same thing for the angles 5, 6, 7, and 8 down below. But for now, just to get the idea, let's just stick with 1 and 4 being vertical and 2 and 3 being vertical. Now, the next concept we have is something called adjacent angles. Adjacent means next to, side by side. So if I'm looking for adjacent angles, we need to know that they share a common side and that they are next to each other. So if I'm looking at angle 1, who is next to angle 1? Who does he share a side with? Well, he shares a side with angle 2. So for sure, we're going to say angle 1 and angle 2 are next to each other. But who else is angle 1 technically next to? Well, he's also next to 3. He shares a side with angle 3. So angles 1 and 3 are adjacent. That means they are next to each other. And I could erase and I could start over. Look at angle 2. Who is he next to? Well, he's next to 1. We've already listed that. And 2 is also next to or adjacent to 4. Okay, and then I could keep going. Who is 4 next to? Well, 4 is next to 2, and 4 is also next to 3. And I could keep going all the way around. Now, those do not have the same measure. It's just that they are adjacent to each other. They are next to each other. The next concept or definition is for what is a complementary angle. Now, you have worked with complementary angles before, probably for sure in 6th grade, for sure in 7th grade, maybe even before that. Complementary angles are two angles, has to be two angles, that have a sum of 90 degrees. A sum of 90 degrees. So I've drawn a little example here where we have, this is where I'm looking, angle A is 20 degrees, angle B is 70 degrees, and when you add them up, they create a 90 degree angle. So the two angles that are complementary are angle A and angle B, because they sum to 90 degrees. Next definition, what are supplementary angles? Supplementary, again, has to be two angles, and this time, supplementary, they add up to 180 degrees. So if I'm looking at the design, angle C is 120, angle D is 60, and when I add C and D together, I get 180 degrees. So it would be angle C and angle D are supplementary. Perpendicular lines, now this is definitely a review. Perpendicular lines are two lines that intersect each other and form a 90-degree angle. And then there's an example of perpendicular lines. Parallel lines, two lines that are on the same plane that never intersect, right? So like straight train tracks, those are parallel lines. So we would say that line E is parallel to line F. That's that little notation that you see down there at the bottom of the screen. So we have a few more definitions on the next slide here. We have things that are called alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding angles. So let's talk about the alternate interiors. So here we have, again, our parallel lines down here at the bottom. We have our transversal that's cutting through them, and we have 8 angles as a result of that. Alternate interiors would be the angles that are on the inside of the parallel lines. So I'm looking at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And alternate means one is on the right side, one is on the left side. So looking at 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, the alternate interiors would be 3 and 6. And 4 and 5 are alternate interiors. Now, the nice thing and the important thing to know is that they are congruent to each other. So if I tell you that angle 4 is 50 degrees, so is angle 5. And if I tell you that angle 3 is 130 degrees, so is angle 6. Alternate, meaning right or left. Interior, meaning inside the parallel lines. Alternate exterior angles. We're talking about the angles that are on the outsides of the parallel lines. And they're alternate because one will be on the left side of the transversal and one will be on the right side of the transversal. So I'm going to look for my alternate exteriors. My exterior angles are 1 and 2 and 7 and 8. Those are the outside angles, the exteriors. Alternate would be 1 and 8. And 2 and 7. And again, the really important thing to know about alternate exteriors is that they are congruent to each other. So again, if angle 2 is 130 degrees, so is angle 7. And if angle 1 is 50, so is angle 8. Now, the last definition is for corresponding angles. Okay, I'm going to erase my design here and show you what corresponds with what. So when we talk about corresponding angles, we're comparing this group of angles to this group of angles down here. And I'm looking for angles that are in the same position as each other, but they're in different groups. So if I'm looking for corresponding angles, they're in the same position, but on a different parallel line. So that would be angle 1 corresponds down here to angle 5, right? Aren't they kind of in the same position? Just in different groups? And look at 2. Who matches up with 2? That would be 6. Okay? And look at 3. Who matches with 3? Down below, it's 7. And last but not least, we have angle 4 matching up, corresponding with angle 8. And again, the cool thing about corresponding angles is that they are congruent to each other. So if angle 1 is 50, so is angle 5. If angle 2 is 130, so is angle 6. If angle 3 is 130, which it is, so is angle 7. And if angle 4 is 50, so is angle 8. So this is a lot of definitions, a lot of different kinds of angles. I would highly encourage you to print this off and take down these notes because a lot of your assignment is going to be figuring out the measures of angles and defining the relationships between them. Are they adjacent? Are they vertical? Are they complementary? Are they supplementary? Alternate interior? Oh my gosh, I could keep going on, right? But all in all, it's a lot of definitions. And we are going to have an angle relationships worksheet that we're going to be working on during class for the next few days. So thanks for watching. I realize it was a lot of definitions. I think you'll get some good practice with this, and then hopefully these definitions will make a little bit more sense once you get some hands-on practice, all right? I'll see you in class.